Another city gripped by protest today after an unarmed black man is shot to death by a white police officer. The shooting happened on Friday in Madison, Wisconsin. Police responded to a call of a man wandering through traffic, and authorities say Officer Matt Kenny followed 19-year-old Tony Robinson into an apartment, and that is where they say Robinson assaulted the officer and Kenny fired his weapon. Hello everyone, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York. Kenny has been placed on administrative leave following that shooting. I want to go out to Madison, where ABC's Lindsay Janice is standing by. And Lindsay, we've seen outrage like this over police shootings happen before. What is happening in Madison right now?
Dan, quite the scene unfolding right now. You can see the protesters behind me. There are, we think, thousands at this stage. They just came out of the Capitol building. Just a few minutes ago, they were all of them inside the Capitol building here in Madison. They were chanting. Now, I was struck by the age of the crowd. These were mostly high schoolers, some middle schoolers as well. Now, university students are also part of this protest, but it started this morning at a couple of high schools. The one that Tony Robinson attended, students walking out of that high school, going to another, picking up some other kids, then walking, marching through town here to the Capitol. That's when they entered the building.
Lindsay, also, after this shooting, there had been demonstrations, in fact, right at the apartment building where Robinson was shot, and involving the police chief of doing something rather unusual.
That's right. The police chief came out on Saturday, right away, was apologetic, said, I'm going to be transparent about this. Tony Robinson was not armed. He also named the officer, 45-year-old Matt Kenny, a 12-year veteran of the force.
Do we know at this point, did he know that the suspect, that Robinson, or excuse me, that Tony Robinson, did he had a weapon at all at that point?
It is not known whether the officer thought that Tony Robinson had a weapon. We haven't heard anything because, of course, the police chief doesn't want to comment now because the investigation has been handed over to the state's Justice Department's Division for Criminal Investigation, the DCI. So they're in charge of investigating this. The police cannot investigate themselves. That's thanks to a law passed just last year here in Wisconsin. But I can tell you, these protests have been extremely peaceful. The tensions are rising, but we just heard in the Capitol building from one of the organizers, a woman from an organization called Black and Gifted, and she said that she told the kids in the crowd that if anyone from the outside should try to incite violence, she wants them to stop that in its tracks. They are adamant that they want this city to stay nonviolent.
So, Lindsay, in this actual exchange, then, do we know then if Kenny, the police officer, was he hurt? I mean, I know that there had been, there's an investigation underway as far as whether or not a scuffle had taken place. What do we know about that?
Well, the police chief on Saturday said that Kenny was indeed injured. He had gone to the hospital, though, just as a precautionary measure, also because in these circumstances, these officer-involved shootings, they have to give a blood sample to, I guess, prove that nothing was in his system. But here's how we're told it went down on Friday night. About 6:30, police were at least 3 callers reporting, complaining about Tony Robinson's behavior. We're told some of them naming him by name, saying that he had been causing trouble, jumping in and out of traffic, he had hit a friend. Another report that he had gone into a local Chinese restaurant and tried to strangle a patron. Of course, these were all reports that the police were following up on. And the police also knew Tony Robinson. He was on probation because he pleaded guilty to being part of an armed robbery last year. So he was a party to that armed robbery, and so he was under police surveillance.
And Lindsay, about the officer, Matt Kenny, then, this is not the first time that he's actually fired his weapon on duty, correct?
That is true. Back in 2007, Matt Kenny was involved in another officer-involved shooting. He shot a man to death. However, in that case, he was exonerated. The police chief described it as a suicide by officer type situation. We know he actually received a commendation for that. Now, when he arrived, I should have told you this before, he arrived at the scene where Tony Robinson was supposedly causing trouble. He then listened in to the apartment where Tony Robinson was, a place where his friends lived but weren't home at the time. It was just Tony Robinson. And he said he heard a disturbance. The officer reported back about that disturbance and said, "I'm going to have to go in." He then forced entry, and moments later, that's when those shots rang out. The police have confirmed it was multiple shots. They say that Kenny was attacked by Tony Robinson before those shots rang out.
And lastly, Lindsay, I want to ask you about this then. Has the Department of Justice, has there been any kind of indication that, in fact, they might begin an investigation on this?
We have not heard word of that yet. At the moment, the Wisconsin state, its Department of Justice has this division called the DCI. They're in charge of the investigation right now. They will hand over their findings to the District Attorney of Dane County.
All right, ABC's Lindsay Janis in Madison, Wisconsin. Lindsay, thank you for that. You can keep up with the story in real time downloading the ABC News app and starring the story for updates on the go. I'm Dan Kleffler in New York.